Blow open your current knowing of health insurance and sick care and feel into the truly supportive, generous community health coverage of CrowdHealth with founder and CEO Andy Schoonover. Honor yourself, celebrate your strength, empower your transformation with your Yin-care. This is the Yin-care podcast, and I'm your host, Margaret Jacobson, the Mother Rising. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Yin-care podcast. I'm your host, Margaret Jacobson, the Mother Rising, and I'm really excited to dig into today's episode with our guest who is here. But let me just take a couple minutes to set this up for you. Roughly 13 years ago, I was at the tail end of my divorce, and I had been working in integrating medicinal practices of multiple modalities into the Western medical system. I had also completed a wellness coach training program called Well Coaches, and I had a deep knowing that I had the full capacity to care for myself. And probably slightly naively, that should any catastrophe befall me, that with my master's in health service administration, I would be able to negotiate down a cash payment amount with any hospitals or medical care providers if something dire happened. But I was really at a crossroads at that time because I had been covered by insurance with my ex's work, and I had to decide if I was going to pay an exorbitant amount of money monthly to continue that, which was going to be nearly impossible as a single mother, or if I was going to step into the abyss of living true to my innermost beliefs. And that was also during the time of Obamacare, and having insurance was required. And I believe in some states it still is. We're going to discuss this with our guests. So I also had to consider, as I was also at that time voluntarily paying taxes as a U.S. citizen, which now I've established myself as an American state national, and I'm not doing that, but I had to be sure that I was comfortable with that penalty, and could I afford that if I wasn't going to have insurance? And I believe at the time the penalty was about $1,500, and that fee was just so much cheaper than the monthly health insurance. And I remember that to be around, I felt like it was $600 or $700 or something like that. And I started to think to myself, how could I create my own health and longevity plan if I had that $600 to $700 a month, which opened a whole new perspective on how I would, in the end, continue approaching my health in what I refer to as health creation. And in the end, I opted to step into that abyss where my biggest fear actually ended up being discovered by my parents, that I didn't have health insurance, because it was completely socially unacceptable to step out of that paradigm. Which leads me to our guest today. About maybe 5 months ago, I was just searching under Sovereign Health or something to that nature, and our guest company popped up on my radar. And this is so exciting for me to share with you, because I feel what he has to offer is such a perfect step to take without being as naive and possibly as crazy as I was. So today I have for you here Andy Schoonover, founder and CEO of CrowdHealth. And CrowdHealth is a wonderful option that is helping healthy Americans opt out of the health insurance cartel that is invested in keeping everyone sick and showing Americans that an alternative and better way exists. Traditional health insurance is often impersonal and unreliable with twisted incentives. And CrowdHealth is really changing that narrative. They treat their members like family, assisting them on their health journey, managing their health bills, and at a truly affordable cost. CrowdHealth is creating a system where the focus is on keeping their members healthy rather than profiting from their illnesses. And their goal is to redefine the meaning of healthcare in our society. So Andy has some personal experiences with his daughter's health that initially was the impetus that led him to this. But let's welcome Andy in and hear that story from him. Andy, welcome. Welcome to the Yin-care podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. That was quite an intro. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It is. You have truly a remarkable it's so innovative. And I'm so curious to hear about how it just dawned on you to do that, because the creative aspect of just being open to how could there be something that's got to be better than what is existing. But can you also share with everybody what happened for you with your daughter?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. This is my second healthcare company. I actually sold my first one, and since I wasn't employed anymore, I didn't have health insurance. Many of us get health insurance through our employer, like you previously said, and I didn't have that anymore. So I thought my only other option was to go with an Obamacare option, which for my wife, me, and my two girls was, I think, $1,100 or $1,200 a month. And so I kind of joke it worked until I had to use it. My little one, who was one at the time, was having recurring ear infections. And so couldn't sleep through the night, was screaming all day long, took her to the pediatrician and said she had a hole in her eardrum. So in essence, the fluid was building up in her eardrum and eventually popped her eardrum. And that was what was causing the pain. And so we went on to an ear, nose, and throat doctor who said, yep, that I have to have a procedure done. And it was a 15-minute procedure. It totally cured her, back to sleeping, back to being the beautiful little 1-year-old we remembered before these ear infections. And little did I know I was going to get a note from my health insurance plan. It was about 3 or 4 weeks later, and they said it was medically unnecessary, and so they weren't going to pay for it. And I was like, wait, hold on a second. Like, this was an ear, nose, and throat doctor, a pediatrician, all told me the same thing, that this had to be done. And so why is this not medically necessary? So we appealed it twice, and at the end of the day, they refused to pay for it. So unfortunately, I had to stroke an $8,000 check for this procedure.
Goodness.
And as you can imagine, I was pretty upset. So I called my health insurance plan and I said, look, if you're not going to pay my bills, I'm not going to pay your bills. And I quit. So it was
Wow,
at that point
awesome.
where I exited the system. And as you can imagine, similar to sounds like what your parents said, my wife was like, so what are we going to do now? And I learned over kind of an 18-month journey is that we can pay significantly less if we pay the doctor directly as opposed to going through health insurance. And so I come to learn that $8,000 bill probably could have been somewhere between $1,500 and $2,500 if I had paid in cash. And so I built all these tools that allowed us to navigate healthcare without having health insurance, and got to that point of which other people would be interested in this too. Nobody likes health insurance. There was a survey, I think 3 or 4 years ago, of the most hated industries in the United States. And guess who was at the top? Health insurance.
Yeah,
And pharma.
sure.
And pharma was right up there with them. So
Yeah.
I decided to start a company to help people ultimately pay for their large and small healthcare bills without having health insurance.
Wow. That is so cool. And so did you started it you were just doing it yourself basically and having success, and then that inspired you to take it to a bigger place? Is that what happened?
Yeah, exactly. And I started talking to people, and everybody seemed to have the same reaction to what we were doing. Like, oh my goodness, are you sure you want to do this? As you said, it was kind of a cultural norm. We've been conditioned since as long as I can remember that you have to have health insurance. And so I'm just a bit of a contrarian by nature. And so I was like, I bet you I can figure out how to do this without health insurance. And through adversity comes mission. Oftentimes we had adversity and a mission has come out of it. And now we've got 10,000 people that are members of our community that are saving about $2 million a month on their healthcare by using CrowdHealth as opposed to having health insurance.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that you were just saying, how the insurance industry is such a hated industry. One of the things that I think in my mind, the first thing that pops up that was so frustrating when I was interacting with it was the continued loops of, I don't know what you call it, like press 1 for this, press 2 for that, You'd call for help on something, and it was just like a monotony of the same thing over. You could never get someone. I remember one time, actually, my daughter was hospitalized for pneumonia when she was about 20 months old. And when she came home, she was on, I want to say it was clindamycin orally. It was terrible to give her. It was just like ridiculous. And for some reason, they couched the phone call in, we're checking up on you. And I should know this. I had a master's in health services administration, but you're so vulnerable, right? as your child has been in the hospital and you're just trying to, you're like, you've been in a war, you're trying to just get through it. And they're basically determining whether or not they're going to continue paying for an antibiotic that has to be given for X number of days. But what was happening actually, now I'm remembering, she was nursing at the same time. She was still really young, right? And so the way I would give it to her was to like nurse her and then shove it in her mouth, like in between feeding her. And she would spit it back out. And so I was running out of the medicine and they wouldn't pay for another batch. But in order for it to be effective, you have to go the course, right? But they were basically determining whether or not they wanted to continue covering it. So anyway, I wanted to just acknowledge the fact that you've mentioned when I've listened to other interviews, how your staff is so personable when people call in and have an issue. So I was hoping you could explain that to our audience.
Yeah, I mean, one of the great things about founding a company is that you can change all these things you hate about the alternative. One of the things I hated was, again, having to call into a call center, and oftentimes the call center isn't even in this country, and I'm explaining my healthcare needs, and they would say, "Oh, well, I can't help you with that. You have to go talk to somebody else." And then I'd wait on the line for another 20 or 30 minutes, and I talked to them, and they would punt me to somebody else. And so it's just unhuman in many ways that we're trying to deal with significant healthcare issues and we don't have anybody on the other end of the line to actually care about us. And so what I did when I started CrowdHealth is saying, look, everybody in our community is going to have one person internally that they can call and talk to. We call them care advocates, and they get to know you, you get to know them, and you can really rely upon them to solve your problems. So that's what we've done with CrowdHealth. And people really love it because, again, it humanizes the experience and it gives us the opportunity to love on our members. And funny enough, about 12 months ago, when I asked the team, I said, look, what really differentiates us? And somebody spoke up and they said, we legit care. And that's what we're trying to do, is like legitimately care for our members. I'll give you one just little example. We had a member in Colorado who was hiking with I think it was a 5-year-old. He fell, he hit a rock, and had a big skash down his side of his face. And he didn't want to go hiking with his dad anymore. And so we sent him a little $75 climbing equipment so that he could do it in the living room. He could get back to used to be climbing, and with a little note that says, we hope he continues on his adventures. And so the mom just thought that was so special, that we want adventurers in this world. And this little guy, because of one little situation, didn't want to go out on hikes anymore. And so got a note a few weeks later that says, guess what? He's going back on hikes with his dad. So
cool.
Where we try to love on our members. And in fact, I tell all of our care advocates, you have X amount of dollars every month. You have to spend it on loving our members well, so that they feel like we're actually there and loving them. So it's a cool thing to be able to be the kind of antithesis to health insurance, which is cold and inhumane and almost acts like your enemy when you come to your healthcare as opposed to your ally. I know that when people get hurt, big happens, what do they say? They say, now I got to go fight with my health insurance plan. It's that there's animosity there. And what we want to be is like, oh, now I got CrowdHealth to be my ally in my healthcare journey as opposed to my enemy. And so that's what we're really trying to focus on.
That is awesome. I mean, that's what we're doing. That's what we're here to do, is to build the reality that we want to be living in, which is kindness and love and all of that, and generosity. And that is fantastic that you're doing that as a company. It's funny you say Colorado. We actually, so for our company, Yao Company is the overarching company, but my husband does Chinese medicine, and he's had his practice in Denver for over about roughly 25 years, very successful practice. It's impossible to get him to leave it completely and move up to, we have a clinic here in Lander, Wyoming, but we haven't fully opened it because he's constantly commuting back and forth there. But we are a cash only office, and we do run labs. He does have the ability to order labs on behalf of the patients. We obviously, with our patients, some of them are insured, most of them are insured, but we don't accept their insurance, even if they are covered by acupuncture, just because it's a ridiculous amount of red tape. And it really takes away from the actual care that they're receiving, in my opinion, for us to be distracted with that aspect. For example, in Chinese medicine, he's going to have a Chinese medical diagnosis, but for some reason, we have to transcribe that into a Western medical diagnosis and give it a billing code. And he's not really trained to do that. It's ridiculous to even ask that of a Chinese medical practitioner, but it helps us to keep our costs down by just really, there's no administration on top of that, really, because it's just about the time that it takes for him to do his job well. For the labs, will increase it just a little bit to cover admin fees for processing and whatnot, but that's basically it. But anyway, it's just interesting that you've got people all over the place. I know there were a couple things related to that area I wanted to go back to, but let's backtrack a little bit. And if you could explain to everybody what really is CrowdHealth, how does it work, and the cost per month and the subscription fees and stuff like that. Like, how does it work? Because it's a really cool model.
Yeah, so we're a peer-to-peer funding platform. So in essence, what happens if somebody, I'll give you an example. My daughter falls off her bike and breaks her arm, and it's $5,000. What we ask the family to do, or the individual, is, hey, look, we want you to have some skin in the game. So you pay the first 500, and then we'll go out to the community. And for just ease of math, we'll ask 45 people for $100, and they can say yes or no. But if they say yes, then $100 goes from their account to my account. And at the end of the day, I'll have $500 that I pay plus the $4,500 from the community. So I can go pay my doctor in cash. And as a result of that, get much, much better prices. So then the question is like, okay, so why would somebody voluntarily give to Andy and his daughter's broken arm? Well, when I submit a bill to the community sees the last 10 times that I've been asked, have I said yes, 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 or have I said no, 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 no? Am I being a good member of the community, or am I not being a very good member of the community? So 100% of the time, if I've said yes, 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 those funds have gotten fully funded by the community. But in essence, what we're trying to do is get people cash so they can pay their doctor directly. And as a result of that, get way better prices. You know, what we've heard from doctors is it costs them somewhere between 30 to 40% of their revenue to actually get paid by health insurance plans. And so if you can strip out all that bureaucracy, all that administration, all that red tape, they're actually willing to give you significantly better rates if you pay them directly, as opposed to them having to bill health insurance. So that's the way it works. And as a result of that, we can get prices down really, really low, significantly lower than anywhere else. So for an individual, what happens is I will charge you $55 a month. That goes directly to CrowdHealth. That's for us to keep the lights on and pay for all those care advocates that I talked about, pay for all the negotiators that help you negotiate bills. And then we'll ask you for up to an additional $140 a month. And that money will go directly to another person in the community to help them with a health event. So you will actually know when you give, you're giving to someone in Austin, Texas for their daughter's broken arm. So you know exactly where your money is going. If you pay to United Healthcare or whoever, you have no idea where that money is going. You're actually helping an individually directly, which is really cool.
So
go ahead.
Question on that. So the let's just say 190, and I know that there's a range, it fluctuates per month, but is that what you were saying, where I would have the choice to choose to fund, or is that on top of the 190 that CrowdHealth is determining?
Yeah, great question. That 55 that goes to us is, again, our fees. The 140, the additional 140 is
my mistake.
No, it's fine. That's the choice. You have a choice to give that to another human or not. Okay. And I say up to 140 because, and so that 140 plus 55, we will never ask you for more than 195 a month. But in fact, what has happened is our bills have been so low that we're not even asking for the total 140. So for example, in April, we're only asking for 80 of the 140 because we are only asking for what the community needs. And so if the community does really, really well, that means you're saving, which is kind of neat. In the insurance space, if the community does really well, the insurance company profits. So this is totally turning that on its head. And that also allows us for when we have really, really big bills, or typically when a number of big bills happen at the same time, we can scale up that 80 to the full 140. And then once those bills get paid, we can go back down to whatever the community needs. So what we ask our members to do for if you're an individual is, hey, budget for 195. And if we ask you, for example, this month, 135, yay, you have $55 extra that you can go and do with whatever you want. We're never going to ask for that ever again. So that's something you can do and spend it whatever way you want. So you're benefiting from the community doing really well. And that has changed behaviors, candidly. Once you get people a community, you're not going and messing with United Healthcare's deal. You're actually messing with other human beings who are trying to help you fund these healthcare bills. So that's pretty neat.
I think what's also so cool about it is it's retraining us on a societal level to be generous once again, because we've just been, and no judgment on anybody, we've just been programmed to take care of ourselves, because it does feel like we've been in this like war with everything else around us. But to create a system that incentivizes people to be decent human beings again, it's like, that's what I mean. It's just got so many great things, because not only are you taking care of people in a time of what can be a crisis for them, you're also allowing everybody else to feel what it feels like to be generous, which is huge.
Amen. Yeah. That's one of our kind of core principles is generosity. I agree with you that we've been conditioned not to take care of other human beings around us. And from my perspective, it's because insurance companies have said, hey, you don't have to worry about them. We got them. Or it's the government who said, don't worry about them. We've got them. In reality, we as communities should take care of our own, from my perspective, and be generous with one another and love each other and be kind to one another. And so we're trying to reinstill that through this community funding. And I'll tell you just a quick story where our number one request for bills is babies. So just we have lots of people in their 20s and 30s and early 40s, and they're having babies. And so that happens. And unfortunately with that comes miscarriages. And so we've sent out requests to help people with a miscarriage. And we've had women come back to us, especially being like, I know what this person is going through. I know the pain they're feeling. I know just like the distress that family is going through. You know, instead of $100 this month, can I give $200?
Wow.
And it really just shows the impact of, like, you're actually, what we say is fund humans, not health insurance. So you're funding other human beings directly, as opposed to them relying upon health insurance to get their bills paid. So it's a really neat component of our model and our system.
Absolutely. That's so cool. So I just want to go back to the sort of one aspect of this, which is how people can so quickly be devastated by lack of insurance coverage, even though they're quote unquote covered, and how it can really create even leading them into bankruptcy. So can you explain what's happening on a societal level for us as Americans in that department?
That's super sad. About 200,000 families last year went bankrupt due to a medical event, even though they had health insurance. So these are people who had health insurance and still going bankrupt. I mean, the whole point of insurance is to keep you from going into financial distress. And unfortunately, health insurance is not alleviating that distress. And there's two primary reasons for that. One is huge deductibles. So I actually checked this year for my family for the Obamacare plan just to see what it would be. And I think it was $1,300 or $1,400 a month. And then it was either a $14,000 or a $16,000 deductible, which in essence means that I'm paying $30,000 a year before the health insurance plan pays a dime. And so if you don't have $10,000, $12,000, $14,000 in the bank, and you have a big health event, or God forbid, a series of health events, then you're in deep financial trouble. That's why at CrowdHealth, we just ask you to come up with the first 500 before we submit the rest of the community. Pretty much everybody can figure out a way to come up with $500. And so we want to keep people from going into financial distress. So that's reason number one, is these really high deductibles. Reason number two, and people don't understand this, is that about 20% of the bills that are submitted in health insurance plans are denied. So, are denied. So unfortunately, I was 5 and I had to stroke an $8,000 check, but not everybody's got $8,000 in their bank account so that when they get it declined, they actually have money to pay for it. So that's the number two reason why people are going into financial distress, is because of these bills that have been denied by health insurance plans. And individuals have very little recourse on that, government, whatever, until that. In essence, that's pretty worthless. It never
Yeah.
really results in a good outcome. So it is a sad state of affairs when we have people going bankrupt as a result of a medical expense.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. You were breaking up just a little bit there, but I think everything came through. What is I guess a couple of different questions is what would you consider or what would CrowdHealth consider a medical necessity so that people can get an idea as to what would be eligible for that $500 expense that they would pay, and then the rest would be submitted to CrowdHealth?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we don't do any kind of medical necessity filters. Ultimately, this is between you and your doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And unless you're doing something like totally crazy, we had a guy who had something going on that was $100,000 surgery, and only one doctor in the entire country would do it. And it was at the point we did tell that guy, I was like, look, this is not proven. Like, you can't do something that only one doctor in the entire country will do. He ended up doing it anyways, and he paid for it himself. And we talked to him 6 months later, and it did not solve his problem. So that is the only example I know of in 20,000 bills that we've actually, and he appealed that to, we have an appeals process where we've got a group of 5 people who are members who will look at his account and our account, and then they make the decision. So we don't ultimately make the decision on that. We have other members of the community doing that, but that's the only one I can remember.
Crazy.
Yeah. And so, look, we take the kind of position of this is between you and your doctor. And so what you and your doctor think is appropriate for your care, we will submit to the community as eligible. We have a list of things on our website that we won't, and they're pretty obvious types of things. If you want cosmetic surgery to enhance this or enhance that, those are clearly not eligible. That's not within the framework of what we're doing. But other than that, there's not a lot that we don't find eligible. We make it very clear what we don't find eligible, and we stick to that. And if anything, we give you the benefit of the doubt, because the last thing we want, again, we don't make any money from declining bills, whereas insurance plans make more money if they decline bills. So our incentive is to get these bills funded for you. And we know that if we don't, you're going to go online and go on X and Instagram or whatever and tell all the people that you didn't get their bill funded. So we have every incentive in the world to get these bills funded. So there's just not a lot of times where we say this is not eligible unless it's specifically outlined in the guidelines. I think we make a joke. We make a joke in one of our guidelines. If you go swim in a pool of sharks and something happens, don't be silly. Don't be silly. But other than that, we've had amazing results when you reestablish the doctor-patient relationship without a government or a health insurance plan or an employer in between you. We just find that's the better route to go.
Exactly. We find that I've found that on the administrative side of our practice when I was more working in our clinic. And because I took our clinic and organized all the systems behind it as far as just the administrative stuff, the website and how we were billing for appointments and reminding for appointments and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things that I always found that was huge was that there was something really actually magical that happened when people paid for their appointment. And we always say when people are coming, because the initial visit appointment is a little bit more expensive than the follow-up appointments, because it's just an investment of more time, but it's definitely not exorbitant. I've seen some people charging like ridiculous amounts, but we really try to respect people's financial pocketbook because it is so much a part of their health. They get, when you bring fear into, you're trying to get well, and yet you're afraid you're not going to be able to pay your bill. That's not really quite helpful. It's counterproductive. So we'll work with people if they have to do payment plans or such with us. But I always made them pay like at least 50 to 60% of the first visit, because otherwise they don't take it seriously. It's just a similar interaction as if it's covered by insurance and they're not participating in the health. But when they have to pay for it, it's like you're almost in a weird way doing them a favor by charging them to reestablish the level of responsibility that they have in their own health. And I was curious about my experience with this and wondering what you were finding, because certainly people are having to pay out of pocket for their health for certain things as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the incentive system is aligned when you're paying directly for the services that are provided. And I think people start paying attention to prices. You know, if you were to go buy a new car and somebody else was paying for it, you probably would buy a different car than if you were paying for it. And so you would make sure that if you're paying for it, you got to make sure that the car meets your needs and is suitable. And if you got a huge family, you might get a different car than if you got a small family. And so those personal choices are really, really important when you pay with your own money. And if you're paying with somebody else's money, all of those incentives pretty much disappear. And so we're really trying to build a nice balance there where we can help you with the really big bills, but there's still lots of personal responsibility involved.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And then you guys actually, I feel like I heard you say that, I don't know how you do this, or if you're just, again, generous in spirit and doing this, but I heard you say that you even help your members negotiate things that are not ending up being covered by the community. If they're getting something, I think I heard you say if they needed to get a certain procedure and it may or may not be covered or whatever, that you've said, hey, come to us first. Let us find the best deal for you. Tell everybody a little bit about that.
Yeah, we've got a team of people who negotiate bills. And so we are happy to negotiate any bill that you have, regardless of whether it's eligible or not. And most of the times this happens when somebody has something. You know, one of the things pieces of our system is if you have a pre-existing condition and you come into the community, we want you to be a part of the community before you submit those to the community. So you can't just have a knee replacement, come in and then leave. Like, that's just not community focused. That's not how communities work. But if you still want that knee replacement, then we'd be happy to negotiate it for you. And in fact, we've got this huge database of cash pay prices throughout the country for orthopedic surgeons or whatever the specialty might be that can help you with that. So we're more than happy to open that up to people and actively negotiate on your behalf, even if it's for a bill that's not eligible to be funding. Like I said, those are few and far between, but they're primarily for people who have these pre-existing conditions. We've got a number of people with type 1 diabetes, for example, and they want help negotiating their insulin. And so we're able to find them insulin that is significantly less than they would be able to find it through their health insurance plan. So we absolutely help people regardless of kind of the eligibility status with negotiating these bills.
And so they can also, you can negotiate pharmaceuticals or, I don't know, even prescription medicines that are prescribed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had a member, I believe it was in Colorado also, that had, I believe it was lymphoma, and the medication that she was on was $40,000 a month. And so we went and negotiated with the pharmaceutical company and got that down to $2,500 a month. So we can help you with the pharmaceuticals as well. We're typically not a pharmaceutical first type of organization, but there's certain situations in which you got to rely upon some of those things, and we'll help our members negotiate those as well.
Absolutely. And obviously in the medicine business that we're in, we're not pharmaceutical people ourselves, but my husband, Daniel, would say sometimes in a medical situation, you need a medication that acts like a dictator to just establish order. And then you need an exit strategy to get the dictator out of there. I always love that analogy. I think it's really good. But okay, so for tax purposes, as far as, because I've been out of this obviously for a while, what states have, or how many states or whatever is easy to explain, have a penalty if you don't have an Obamacare or government insurance plan, or you're not covered by your business, your employer or whatever? What are the fees that people might bump up against, if you've got an idea?
Yeah, there's no federal fee any longer. There are 5 states and Washington, D.C. that require health insurance or you get penalized It's California, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Rhode Island, and Vermont. And so before you sign up, you just need to understand what those penalties are, and we can help you with determining what those penalties are. What we have found is that these penalties oftentimes are significantly less than the money you're saving by transitioning over from health insurance. So we've got pretty large groups of people in each one of those states that have decided to join us despite those fees.
And that's exactly what I went up against when I waited. I was like, this is insane. I'd pay an outrageous amount more just in my health insurance to have it. Who cares what? Bad girl. Bad girl, you've got a fee on whatever. Ask that also selfishly because my son is in California and he has been struggling to decide to make this decision for himself. And one of the questions that he had in particular was, I think that there's an enrollment period to be part of the HSA plan or something like that, but could he use his HSA money to pay for CrowdHealth? Would that be something that you guys accept, or are you guys not? It doesn't matter to me. I'm no judgment. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, we're ruled by law, unfortunately, and HSAs, you can pay directly for your healthcare expense, but you can't pay for CrowdHealth using your HSA, unfortunately. Now, there are a couple bills right now in Congress that will open up HSAs to more things and will enable you to have an HSA without having a health plan. Because right now, you have to have a health plan to have an HSA. But there are some bills out there that will definitely open it up. So I'm optimistic that in the next 12 months, some of these things will change.
That's so cool. Okay, so then this one is my burning question that's very personal. So the insurance companies cannot like what you're doing.
No.
So how are you managing that? That's got to be, my heart goes out to you guys. So whatever you're having to deal with, if you want to share, I'd love to hear, but if you don't want to share, I understand that too.
No, and thanks for asking. Yeah, I mean, look, it's David versus Goliath, and we know who won that battle. But yeah, these health insurance companies, they spend a lot of money on lobbying. They have a lot more money than we do. And and we've battled daily with either them or others that are acting on their behalves to shut this down. And fortunately, we've won every one of those battles. What we're doing, and we've gotten regulators to agree, is a viable way of doing this within the laws of all 50 states. And so we're just kind of continuing on and continuing to fight the battles. And in reality, what we need is people to join us in this battle, because the more people we have who are showing that this is a great alternative to health insurance, the better. You know, there's many other examples in kind of the markets in business where organizations have come up against kind of behemoth folks that are well entrenched. And the way that they won that was that they stood up against these big behemoths and ultimately won. So we're just trying to get as many people involved as possible. And if you're a member of CrowdHealth, please go leave us reviews and things like that, because the more people say, wow, this is actually awesome and really working well, the better we can go to these legislators and these regulators and say, look, our members are happy. They love what they're getting. They hate health insurance. So why are you going to take this away? And so, like I said, ultimately, we're fighting the battles, and it's an expensive thing to do, but we're winning. So we just need more people to join us.
Exactly. So I put it up on here. I still have more questions for you. I hope you're okay to stay for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But I do want people to just see, since we are talking about this, like if you are curious or anything, like just any level, definitely go to it's joincrowdhealth.com. And if you do choose to sign up, you can use code Yin-care and it gets you, I can't remember, I didn't write down. Is it a certain
$99? Yeah, $99 a month for the first 3 months.
Right.
So that's a significant discount to what you pay full. But in essence, what we want to do is say, hey, look, if this is something you're interested in pursuing, give us a try for 3 months. It's $99. It's not the end of the world. And if you like it, then continue on. And if you don't, then that's fine too. But I can tell you the vast majority of people who join stick around because they really enjoy the experience. And that's, I think, a pretty big statement given that the experience that they've historically seen with healthcare payment methods have been pretty abominable.
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so would love to have you just share, you guys have it logistically, you've got an app basically that people will get, right? And so can you give them an idea as to how that works, the interface with how they would interact with CrowdHealth?
Yeah. So if you have let's just say you go to the ER, they won't bill you at the ER. They typically will send you bills afterwards. So all you have to do is when you get that bill in the mail, you go to our app, you take a picture of the bill. We consolidate all those bills on the back end. We'll negotiate it for you. Then we'll say, hey, we got a great price. Are you okay with us going and getting this funded from the community? You give us the thumbs up. We'll go and get it funded by the community. You see in the app how it's going, like how much of your bill has gotten funded. And then when it's fully funded, all you have to do is say withdraw all the funds, and those funds go directly into your personal bank account. And you then have the money to go and pay for your healthcare. If you have a smaller bill, like you're going to see your Chinese medicine doctor, and you can pay that up front, submit the bill, and then we'll go and send it to the community. And typically within 2 weeks, that will be fully funded, and you can then get that money directly back to you. So our turnaround time is about 2 weeks of getting it funded.
Cool. That's really amazing. And so if you're for example, let's just take like, if you do go to the ER, knock on wood, you don't, but if you do, and how does that work? Like in that moment of being in the ER, like how do you're going to tell them you're a cash patient. I think I even heard you say you had an incident where you had to go to the ER. Okay. So tell us how this works.
Yeah, I was actually on a call not too dissimilar to this. And I was talking to somebody, and the vocabulary that I had went from like this to this, meaning I couldn't put together a full sentence. My dad, unfortunately, had a stroke 3 or 4 years ago. And so I thought I was having a stroke. I handed my phone to somebody and it said 911. They called 911. They came and got me, got to the hospital. They asked me, do you have insurance? I said, I'm cash pay. And they took care of me the exact same way as they would have with somebody with insurance. And in fact, there's a federal law that says you have to take care of patients the same way, regardless of their insurance status. So I was taken care of. I got the bills later, and then CrowdHealth did their thing. So it worked out great. And one thing I would just recommend, if your listeners take only one thing away from this, whenever you go to the doctor or the ER, they give you all these pages of things to fill out. We've all seen it. One is the personal financial responsibility form, which we don't read, but what it says is you are responsible for any and all costs that we send you. It doesn't matter what they charge. It doesn't matter what they give you. You are responsible for it, which enables them to charge egregious prices. And so what we asked our members to do is draw a line through that statement that says, I'm responsible for all charges, and just I'm responsible for reasonable charges. And that then gives you the leverage afterwards to say, hey, look, I'm asking for reasonable charges. And if you're a CrowdHealth member, we will fight on your behalf to come up with a reasonable charge. I'll give you one example. I was in the hospital for less than 24 hours. I got 1,000 milliliters of saline, which is basically just salt water, which you can buy on Amazon for $8. Any thoughts on what they actually charged me? Any guesses?
Oh my gosh. Was it intravenously? Or was
intravenously?
It was intravenously. So I'm going to guess there was like an administrative charge on that too, like for
this is beyond the administrative charge.
Just the charge for the saline?
Yeah.
I hesitate to guess. Go ahead, tell me what it was.
$5,000.
What? Okay, no, I was totally going to be way lower than that.
Yeah.
I was thinking like 500. No way.
No. $5,000 for an $8 bottle of saline that I could bought off of Amazon. And so it's things like that that they can charge you for that if you sign that thing. If you don't sign it, then you can actually battle with them and say, I don't understand how you can charge $5,000
Right.
for what I can get off of Amazon for $8. And in fact, I actually did more research, and the hospital can buy it for $2. So that is a wicked, ridiculous, insane, immoral, from my perspective, markup
Totally.
on those services. So if you mark that through, then you actually can battle with them to say that's not reasonable, and we
Totally.
will do that for you if you're a member.
Okay, so
And
question
by the
on
way, if
that.
it's on an iPad, real quick,
Yes,
sometimes they
that's what
do
I
it
was
on an
going to ask.
iPad.
Yes.
What we say is, in the signature line, just say
Mhm.
won't sign, and 100% of the time they don't pay attention to it.
Okay.
And so you are now covered. If they come back to you and said you signed something, you're like, no, I didn't. I said I won't sign. And so there's all these little tricks they try to play on you, which again is immoral to me, because I'm sitting there in the hospital thinking I had a stroke, and they want you to sign these papers that signs your life away. And
Right.
so what we tell our members and everybody out there listening is, make sure you pay attention to what you're signing,
Mhm.
because they will use it against you in the future.
That's fantastic advice. That was exactly my question, was what do you do? Because everything's on those iPads now. So
Exactly.
that's perfect. Wonderful. God, I love this. This is so helpful. I hope everybody's really getting a lot out of this, because it's just a whole paradigm shift on so many levels of empowering yourself, because people are still going to be touching in with that system as it's crumbling. And so
Yeah.
as we're touching in, how do we consistently empower ourselves and remain in our sovereignty and our sovereign choices around things without being bullied into everything? And one of the things that automatically puts you in, God, what's the word for it? It really puts you in that sort of parent-child relationship with either the hospital or the clinic or the doctor, is when they force you to sign all of that stuff. It's like automatically you have to start becoming dependent on someone else. So just that simple act of saying won't sign reestablishes inside you that you have that choice too.
Amen.
Yeah.
100% agree with you. You do
Yeah.
not have to be a slave to the system. You need to be in control, have personal sovereignty over your own health. And I think that's the only way that you stay healthy, because the system actually makes more money if you're sick. And for the love of money is the root of all evil. And I agree with that, because I do believe that the system wants you sick, will keep you sick. They make more money if you're sick. And that includes, funny enough, the insurance plans. So if you can take personal sovereignty over your own healthcare, I think that goes a long, long way in keeping you thriving while you're 80s and 90s. One of the things we say for our members, like, my ultimate goal is that you're 80 years old playing with your grandkids in the backyard. That to me is thriving.
Totally.
And so that's what we want for our members, is to have a life of thriving. And God forbid, no one wants to die slow. That's the kind of the ultimate bad ending to a life, is slow death. So those are the things that we're trying to instill in our members.
And that's a great segue into the aspects of CrowdHealth that really are empowering your community to take, I don't want to say precautionary, but active ways to improve their health. So you have some incentives. Can you explain to everybody your quarterly incentives that you have?
Yeah, we have quarterly incentives, and they're just we call them the quarterly specials. And so these are things that we think that enable you to get data for you to better understand what's going on with your body, so that you can really pay attention to the things that matter. For example, our first quarter was a DEXA scan. A DEXA scan is a scan that shows you your muscle mass, it shows you your visceral fat, it shows you your bone density. These are all things that are important to living a thriving life. Because if you're older and you fall and you have low bone density and you break a hip, it pretty much is the beginning of the end, unfortunately. If you're young and you have lots of visceral fat, and this is fat that's not hanging around your belly, this is fat that's internal, that's hanging around your organs and creates chronic conditions. And so if you can understand where you sit with those types of things, then you can make some lifestyle choices to improve your health. Because I think what we do in our 20s, 30s, and 40s really impact how we live our 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, right?
Absolutely.
And so our special this quarter is a gut health. We believe in gut health being something that's super important. And so in essence, what it is, they send you something, you take a stool sample, you send it in, they'll give you a total overview of what's going on with your gut. Are there parasites there? Things like that.
Right.
Next quarter, we're going to have a coronary artery calcium score, which is basically takes a picture of your coronary artery and see if there's any plaque buildup. Because what we have found and studies are now showing is that everybody's worried about high cholesterol, but in fact, it doesn't really matter if you don't have any plaque in your heart. And so we're trying to get people to start understanding that.
That's great.
So that's one thing that we do. The second thing that we do is if you do really well on these tests, like you have a low visceral fat, the other one we test is for fasting insulin, which is on a fasting basis, what is your insulin levels, which is a key indicator of your metabolic health. If you do well on those, then we will actually give you a discount on CrowdHealth. So you get, right now it's a 10% discount. We're raising that to 20% at the end of the year if you can show that you have low fasting insulin and low visceral fat levels. So it incentivizes our current members to get healthy, and incentivizes the people that are healthy to stay healthy. And it really focuses people in on the data that matters, that we think are very predictive of how well you're going to be living life in your 80s and your 90s.
That is fantastic. I love it. And do you find that your members will take because for me, the first thing that crossed my mind was and this is my obsession with my own health, but the first thing I was going to do with the money that I saved was to start doing the things that I really wanted to do, whether it was like mental, emotional, or spiritual health. I was looking at all those aspects. And so sometimes I would participate in a spiritual community for a 6-month period, or I think right now there's a couple different things that I have a program that I signed up for that's improving your eyesight to see without glasses. I have another program that I'm doing that's like increasing mobility, that are just things that I'm noticing that because I really believe that we can heal ourselves. And it's just a matter of, there's so many resources that are out there that we can access, which is why I'm doing this podcast, is to expose people to a lot of the different options that aren't readily available, especially if you're driven into that system. But do you find that your members are taking advantage and using their dollars saved to do things like that just because now they're like empowered in this new way?
I mean, I think so. Our goal is to save you as much money so that you can spend that money the way that you want to spend it, as opposed to a health plan forcing you to spend your money on things that other people want to spend it on. So we for sure are finding that people are really focusing on health. Like, hey, I've got a little bit more money now. Like maybe I can join a gym now, or I can do some of those other things that may not be eligible for CrowdHealth, but are really important for your, as you said, spiritual, physical, and emotional health. We're all about those things. So, and look, if enough people come to us and be like, I really want X to be eligible, then we always consider that and say, okay, if enough people want that, then let's consider it. So we have never pulled back eligibility, meaning like making less things eligible. We've always been like, community, you tell us. You're the community. You're the ones paying for it. You tell us what you want to be eligible. And a lot of those things I think are right down your alley, which is people want access to non-Western medicine type of doctors. And so we have opened it up to integrative and naturopathic and holistic and even Chinese medicine, where it's like, look, we don't care where you go for your healthcare. So feel free to go to whatever doctor or practitioner that you want to go to. That's important to us, that you get healthy the way that you think you need to get healthy. Acupuncture, historically, I've always not understood acupuncture. And we've had a lot of members come back to us and be like, look, if I have a health event, the easiest way for me to get better historically has been acupuncture. And so we were like, great, if you have a health event and you need acupuncture, then go get acupuncture. So we have opened up eligibility to some things that, out of my ignorance, I didn't really understand. And so I've been educated on those things and like, great, if that's what you want to go and do and it'll get you better, then go for it.
Awesome.
I think chiropractic has been another one where I had a specific event where I've got a condition that a doctor said I needed surgery for, and I go to a chiropractor every 3 months, and it solves the issue, and I don't need a $40,000 surgery, and I don't need knives cutting at me that could have impacts on me in 10 or 20 years. And so we're all about people going and resolving their health conditions in whatever way that they and their doctor feel is appropriate.
That's awesome. I love it. Yeah. I mean, and I agree. It's just so nice to have the finances to be able to have the fluidity to pay for what you deem as your next best health move on your own health journey. And whether or not that's buying organic food, or like you said, joining a gym or whatever, or going to whatever type of care provider you want to go to. Chinese medicine is, I'm glad your community opened your mind to it, because it is really powerful. I mean, specifically as it relates to, we had one instance where we had a patient that had a stroke and had been hospitalized, and the doctor said, "You're never going to walk out of here. You're just going to be in a wheelchair," like consistently telling the patient this. We had to sneak my husband into the room because he's not like an approved. He had to say he was a religious figure that was going to console the patient so that they could close the shades around where he was. And he administered him acupuncture, and he walked out of there 5 days later. Like, I mean, he came every night, but if you could, the problem is they've made it so hard when people do stroke out, they're in the hospital, and getting, like I said, getting someone in there is hard. But even if they can get something like that afterwards quickly, it can be super helpful. Well, I am just thrilled. I really am so grateful, Andy. I want to be sure everybody sees again. If you want to find, that is not very big on here, but let's see if I can fix that. If you want to find Andy on CrowdHealth on their social media, it's basically at Join CrowdHealth on every platform possible. It's Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. They're on all the places. So definitely check out what they've got to say. There's a ton of great other podcasts that Andy's done. So if you just search him out, you're going to find a lot that's there. And also, of course, you can go to joincrowdhealth.com. And again, you can use that code Yin-care for the $99 for 3 months. And I would really love, Andy, to possibly see if you would come back and talk to, if I could arrange for our clinical community to hear from you, because it would be really fun to do something where they could even text in any questions or even be visible and ask. And the other thing that we have that I think is possibly interesting to you is we have a network of about 1,500, mostly Chinese medical practitioners that we distribute a widely used, our herbal wash product. It's called Yin-care's Herbal Wash. And so we have this network of validated practitioners that are all licensed in some way. And I think they would really love to know about what you have to offer too. So it would be great to have you back. I'm so, so thankful. Thank you so much for all your time. Is there anything else that you feel like everybody should know before we wrap up here?
I've got one more just quick story, and that is that, and I think it kind of like encapsulate who our members are. I won't ask you another really hard question, but many people don't understand that about 1.6% of babies are born at home. With CrowdHealth, 50% of babies are born at home. So we have a community of people who truly want to exit this system, that want to be empowered and to make their own healthcare decisions. And that's what we're trying to promote. So if people are out there who are listening or watching fall into that category, we'd love to have you. So yeah, use Yin-care, $99 a month for the first 3 months.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I did hear about that as well. And yeah, that is actually, I'm gonna add my little piece on there, because it is a big thing for me. I feel like the major trauma that is had with us in controlling us as humans happens right there at birth. And it happens in a medical care system. And it doesn't always, there's a lot of different aspects to it. I am really involved in the sovereign birth community in the Free Birth Society. I don't know if you've heard of them. So I am a big proponent of people having their babies at home, and I just love that. And there are, like, even if you're going to free birth, there's going to be some expenses that may come from that. You know, if you're wanting what they call a radical birth keeper that's there with you to support you, that's an alternative to having a midwife or a medical based midwife or these other things. So there's a lot of different options to stop the madness.
Well, I love that. I love that. But like I said, that I feel like that encapsulates our community pretty well.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, Andy. It was really just such a pleasure to have you here today. And I look forward to having you back. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
If you've received something from this episode today, or you believe others you know will benefit, please do share this with others. The Yin-care podcast is newer, and we would love to expand the listenership. We're quite well known for our herbal wash, but the podcast is new. If you are watching on YouTube, please like this episode and subscribe, and even sign up for notifications, and definitely share it around. Andy was fantastic. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave a review or comment on the episode. Any interaction would so incredibly be welcomed. Thank you so much. Also, be sure to check out the Womb Wisdom store on Yin-care.com. We have our regular store with our signature herbal wash to be used with damp heat, or toxic heat conditions in which women can develop things like yeast infections, bacterial vaginosis, or even HPV. It is just such a wonderful product. We've been bringing it into the country for over 20 years, and it is such a well-loved product that is a first line of defense for all of those issues. It's also great and can be used for skin conditions such as sunburns and different types of rashes, etc., as long as you're working with a provider that is familiar with the use and the dilutions for Yin-care. We've got a number of other great products, and we are super close to launching an amazing line of herbal supplements that are practitioner grade. Thanks to my husband, you are all going to just love them. They are so, so cool. And you can also check out our affiliate store. We will have CrowdHealth's link for the Join CrowdHealth.com and the code Yin-care that you'll be able to use. So you'll be able to find it easily there. If for some reason you remember later, you're like, who did she interview? It'll be on the affiliate store on the Yin-care.com website. And also listed there, you'll find Eru woolen products. And I did interview Zoe Daly, the owner and creator of Eru Wool. And there's a wonderful podcast that we did together, as well as the Starfire Wisdom book, where I featured recently the Starfire Wisdom reading group with all of you. So definitely check that out. The book is extremely powerful and life-changing. Everything on the affiliate store will have discount codes to use, and it will be super easy to find there. If you are a practitioner and are interested in opening a wholesale account to sell Yin-care's herbal wash, or already love and recommend Yin-care, we have an amazing practitioner program called the Yin-care Ambassadors. And I just spoke with Andy after the interview, and we are going to really strive to get the Yin-care Ambassadors with a priority meeting with Andy so that they have something special to look forward to. So if you are interested in the Yin-care Ambassadors, you can find it at yincare.com under the About section. If you are a practitioner, you can also go to yaocompany.com, and the Ambassador program is listed there as well. But there's a link at yincare.com, again, under the About menu. So read through that and sign up if it's in alignment with you. So thank you Thank you so much, everyone, for listening today to the Yin-care podcast. I'm Margaret Jacobson, the Mother Rising, and have been your host today. Until next time, be sure to honor yourself, celebrate your strength, and empower your transformation. Thanks for joining me today.